What is up, everybody? Um, so this is going to be the first installment of my new content, where I compare remakes to their original videos, well, original movies. I'm still not entirely sure what exactly I'm going to call these videos. But let's just get straight on to it. So, if you couldn't make the connection when I was talking about this during the first What the Fuck Am I Doing uh, of 2018, the comparison that I'm going to be doing is from an adaptation of a stage play created by Richard O'Brien, and the original movie adaptation of this stage play came out back in 1975, and the remake of the 1975 movie adapted from a stage play was a made-for-TV movie that aired on the Fox network in October of 2016. And if you still haven't made the connection by now, just go ahead and so here's the description. Doesn't really give a good description, so I'm just gonna. Okay, so the whole premise of this movie, well, both the movie and the remake and the original stage play, is this: two very plain, super plain, this couple that have just become engaged decide to take a trip to see the man who was responsible for them meeting, only because like they had class together in his classroom, and on the way to see this former teacher and now friend, they have a blowout and end up walking 2 miles in the rain to find some help, someone with a telephone. And they come across this castle and they think that they've found the help that they're looking for, only to turn out that the castle is owned by people who okay, that's better. Yeah, only to find out that the help they've stumbled upon is not what they were expecting at all. To put it very bluntly, this super plain Jane couple ends up at the home of a super eccentric, controversial, to say the least, man. So it's pretty much the whole movie in a nutshell. Hmm. So I watched the remake when it came out, and let's just say my first reaction when I found out there was going to be a remake and seeing the costumes and the yeah the cast and everything, um, I just could not believe that they would actually think that this was appropriate. I mean, not like it's a bad choice to remake it. It's just I honestly didn't like what I was seeing as far as character design for the remake. Um, I really didn't agree with the part of Frankenfurter being played by what was obviously a woman. I did not realize that uh, Laverne Cox was actually a member of the transgender community who uh, was born male and had the surgery and transformed into a female. When I found that out, I was like, okay, maybe they know what they're doing. And then I watched it, and I was horrified all over again. And then I decided to do this comparison for YouTube and like just watching it over again, and then found parts that really I really liked. So let's just start off with um, the uh, characters and who played it in 1975 and who played it in 2016. So to start off, we have Brad Majors, who is the plain male role. 1975, Barry Bostwick, and 2016, Ryan McCartan. And um, when I went back and watched the remake, my first impression of Brad Majors and who they chose to play the role, I just couldn't help but think that Brendan Urie from Panic at the Disco would have made a much better Brad Majors. Janet Weiss, the fiancée, was played by Susan Sarandon, and uh, and the remake was played by Victoria Justice. And she actually promoted this along with Laverne Cox, who made like a guest appearance while promoting this during the Teen Choice Awards in 2016 alongside John Cena. But yeah, I mean, you're on Nickelodeon promoting a very obviously sexual, I can't even believe this was made for TV movie. Nevertheless, let's just continue with cast and characters. Dr. Frankenfurter, Tim Curry, and Laverne Cox. Riff Raff, the handyman, was played by Richard O'Brien, the creator of the Rocky Horror Show, the uh, the stage play. I keep wanting to call it a screenplay, but it's not. It was stage, not screen. But yeah, Richard O'Brien and Reeve Carney for the remake. Magenta, the maid, played by Patricia Quinn, and Christina Milian. Um, start going through the scenes. Tell you more about her performance. Columbia, who is a groupie, was played by Nell Campbell, and Annalee Ashford. The interesting thing about Nell Campbell being cast is um, Richard O'Brien and some other people, I don't know who else was responsible for Rocky Horror Show and everything. Uh, they heard about this soda jerk, well, soda girl, I don't know what the actual title would be for her. But yeah, anyways, they heard about this waitress at a soda shop who would tap dance while delivering food and soda. And so they went there to the soda shop and she got discovered. And this was her first role playing my favorite character of the entire movie. Rocky, which is the creation, is played by Peter Hinwood and Stas Nair. I honestly should have done a little bit more research on the new cast members and what other parts they have been in, because he reminds me so much of a returning cast member of the American Horror Stories franchise. He really does. I don't. I'm pretty sure he wasn't the same person that I'm thinking of, but it's fairly close in looks. Okay, Eddie, who's a what exactly was Eddie? He was a biker. I think what they called him in the stage play that I watched, that they recorded in 2015 in London. They called Eddie a delivery boy. Anyways, he was played by Meatloaf and Adam Lambert. Then we have Dr. Scott, who is the teacher that Brad and Janet were going to see to announce their engagement to. Was played by Jonathan Adams and Ben Vereen. Then we've got the criminologist, who is the narrator, played by Charles Gray and Tim Curry. Yeah, they brought Tim Curry back, and he could not save this train wreck, sadly. And then we have the usherette. This role, okay, it's in the original stage play, this character. She's only in the first title scene of the 2016 version. She's not featured at all in the 1975 version. If you're not familiar with the first movie, the opening scene is just a set of cherry red lips singing a science fiction double feature. But her name is Roxy, and I only know that from going back and watching the stage play, because I wanted to see if maybe there was another source of inspiration for the remake. And I think they did get some of their inspiration from the stage play. I'll explain that later. So yeah, in the 2016 version, Roxy is played by Ivy Levan. So that is the only added character in the 19 or in the 2016 version. So I can't tell that it's not turned on. Shh. Did I turn it on? I can't tell. There we go. Alright. Now it's on. Main menu. So I'm going to play the opening scene with audio commentary on just to see if it tells us who the lips belong to, because I can't remember, so I'm going to do that. And then we're going to discuss scene by scene this comparison. And this is probably going to be the longest video I've ever done, and this is including my Halloween specials. Ugh. I can't move. I'm thirsty, but I can't move. If I move this pillow, it'll fall. FYI, I can't even see my screen. By the way, commentary is done with Richard O'Brien and Patricia Quinn. Okay, so the lips were Patricia Quinn's.
Science fiction. And I said, well, you can take your movie and shove it up your... Where the sun don't shine? Yes. And they were very amazed because they'd taken me to a restaurant to the all. Yeah, let's do it on. Yes, I know. And I said, I'm not interested. Don't want to. Then they took me around to John Goldstein, one of the other producers, round to his house to see the sets. They said, no, please, but I can't see. Can I just have a look? And then they showed me the pink room. Then they showed me all the drawings, the costumes, whatever. And I said, well, I can't wait. I'll begin tomorrow. I didn't mind about the song.
Okay. So the lips that replaced Roxy are Patricia Quinn's. I think she also did the singing too. But let's just go ahead and get into this. So, science fiction double feature is a very beautiful song to open this movie with. It's basically talking about old science fiction movies, which is where Richard O'Brien got a lot of his inspiration, I think, for his stage play. Because, Frankenfurter and Riff Raff and Magenta, they are not from this planet. They're not from Earth. They're from a distant planet. So it just opens with uh, with her singing about, you know, all these old science fiction films from the 50s and 60s, and, um, but yeah. So how does, open up my notebook, how does Ivy Levan compare to Patricia Quinn? I will say this. Uh, I do like the fact that they added Roxy into the uh, the remake. I like it. As far as the singing goes, it's all right. I understand, updating and giving it a new look and everything. Here's what I don't like: is the very very end. Um, like she's finishing up late night double feature picture show. She fluctuates her voice. She closes her lips for 2 seconds. Her lips are. Then she opens it again and continues with, oh. Like, if she was going to do that, like, as a vocalist, I see that as a complete and total, like, what the fuck are you doing? So, there's parts that I liked, and the parts that I like really don't help the movie at all. I'll just say that. Okay, so science fiction double feature taken care of. We move into, what is it? Damn it, Janet. Oh, but before that, we have the wedding of Brad and Janet's two friends, Betty Monroe and Ralph Hapshack, uh, which leads them to their own engagement. And where I start believing that, they should have cast Brendan Urie as Brad Majors. It would have really made the movie more interesting and more tolerable. But this is what's interesting. At weddings, there's, after the reception and everything, there's always the getaway car for the new bride and groom. In the 1975 movie, written on the car, it says, "Wait till tonight. She got hers, now he'll get his." And in the remake, they changed it up. They wrote, "She said, I do, now I'm doing." Which, basically the same, I guess. Okay, and then we get into, here's another thing that you really need to know about the wedding scene, is that the Transylvanians, they're basically extras who are in the castle when Brad and Janet arrive. They are the friends and they're the family of Betty and Ralph. So they are there in the beginning. And then when we see them later as the Transylvanians in the castle, they're completely different. But it's true for both. It's true for both movies. They used the Transylvanians as the family members at the wedding. Also, you really need to know that Frankenfurter, Riffraff, Magenta, and Columbia, they are at the wedding too. They are, I honestly don't know what it's called or what their parts are called, but like you see them in the original. They work for the church because the whole thing is like first there's the wedding and then during Damn It Janet there's a funeral that they're getting the church prepared for after the wedding. Um, but in the second one, um, actually in the second one, the Transylvanians aren't family members of Ralph and Betty. They are pallbearers during Damn It Janet song. Um, and Frankenfurter, Magenta, Columbia, and Riffraff, they're mourners at this funeral. They're in a graveyard that the church is centered around or in. We gotta move this along. So, how exactly does um, Victoria Justice versus Susan Sarandon and Ryan McCartan versus Barry Bostwick in Damn It Janet? Um, both Susan Sarandon and Victoria Justice as Janet seem to portray, um, it's more about the ring that's so much better than Betty Monroe's ring. Um, what I really like in the original is when Brad's vocal part is coming to an end and it's time for Janet's singing part. Um, he's trying to fumble and get the ring onto Janet's finger, and he's like, as soon as it's on her finger, like he goes in to hold her, I guess, and instead of embracing her, she runs off and like he falls flat on his chest and everything. It's hilarious. I love it. Yeah, they're kind of like basically identical. Like, there's nothing really I can say other than, they changed the style just a little bit. And it's not even Brad and Janet's parts that they tweaked. Um, it's the backup that they tweaked a little bit. And I honestly don't really like the doo-wop, ooh-wah, ooh-wah. I don't. So, I have to give it to the original, but, everything about the original is so much better than the remakes. Moving on. So after that, we're introduced to the criminologist who is an expert and acts as a narrator throughout the entire movie. And as we know, it's Charles Gray in the original, and it's Tim Curry who they brought back. His original role was Dr. Frankenfurter, and now he's playing the criminologist. An interesting little fact is that the original criminologist didn't have an assistant, but I don't know if something happened to Tim Curry, like he lost mobility in his legs or something, but they gave him an assistant. And like throughout the entire movie, he's sitting down. He doesn't stand at all throughout the entire movie. I don't even think he really moves his arms or anything. Like he's just sitting there, motionless, just talking. I don't know. Maybe I should go and see if Tim Curry is now paralyzed or something. Ow. So yeah, we're introduced to the criminologist, and he uh, leads us into Brad and Janet making the journey to see Dr. Scott to announce their engagement. Um, in the original, they're listening to the radio in the car. In the original, it's Richard Nixon's apology speech to America, where he steps down as president after Watergate. And in the 2016 version, they're listening to War of the Worlds. I'm not even going to pretend like I know I should have done a little bit more research, at least to find out who created the War of the Worlds. Sorry. I was gonna do a whole lot more, but I'm just like I gotta get this done. So here we go. And as far as lines go, like word for word, everything that is said in the original is said in the remake, with one exception, I believe. So they have this blowout with their tire, and Janet, Brad's gonna go and to get help, and Janet says, "Where will you go? We're in the middle of nowhere." And Brad says, "Didn't we pass a castle up a couple of miles back?" In the original, Barry Bostwick gave it a few seconds of thought after Susan asked the question. But in this one, it was like question, answer, no thought. Is kind of like forced to like, you know, get more out of, just compress everything. But yeah, so they both go in this pouring rain to the castle to find